The Assassin's Creed franchise has killed off almost every single one of its protagonists. Some died as heroes, some died alone, and some got endings so brutal you'd think the writers had a personal vendetta. Today I'm breaking down how every protagonist met their end, starting with the one who arguably got the most peaceful send-off in the whole franchise, Altair ibn la-Ahad. Altair spent his entire life killing people, decades of it. He was the mentor of the Levantine Brotherhood, the most legendary assassin in the Order's history, and he lived to 92 years old. For a guy in his profession during the 1200s, that's basically immortality. But here's the thing. After all that violence, after all those years of war with the Templars, Altair didn't go out in some blaze of glory. He walked into his personal library, locked the door behind him, sat down with an apple of Eden and the sixth memory seal, and just stayed there. He chose to die alone, guarding artifacts so powerful they could reshape the entire world. No final battle, no dramatic last words, just a warrior deciding he'd done enough. It's the quietest death in the entire franchise, and honestly, almost nothing that comes after it even comes close. Especially not what happened to Ezio Auditore. This is the one that still hurts. Ezio Auditore da Firenze spent decades as the most dangerous man in Italy. 3 entire games of climbing, stabbing, and dismantling Templar operations across 2 continents. He served as mentor of the Italian Brotherhood for a full decade before finally stepping down in 1513, and then he did something almost no assassin in this franchise ever gets to do. He stopped. Ezio retired to a Tuscan villa with his wife Sofia Sartor and their 2 children, Flavia and Marcello. He hung up the hidden blade, traded rooftops for a quiet life, and actually lived it. His last significant act as an assassin was training the Chinese assassin Xiao Jun, passing everything he knew to the next generation, not through violence, through teaching. And then, at 65 years old, while visiting Florence with his wife and daughter, Ezio sat down on a bench and suffered a heart attack. No Templars, no grand conspiracy, no final boss, just a man whose heart gave out. That's what makes it devastating. Gaming's most beloved assassin didn't die fighting. He died like a human being. The Embers short film turned a guy sitting on a park bench into one of the most iconic death scenes in gaming history. He got the one thing almost no character in this franchise ever gets: a normal ending. But if Ezio's death made you emotional, the next one made the entire fanbase furious. Desmond Miles. This is the big one. The death that literally saved the planet. Desmond Miles spent 5 games as a prisoner, kidnapped by Abstergo, strapped into an Animus, forced to relive the memories of his ancestors, while the Templars picked through his DNA like a filing cabinet. He didn't ask for any of it, the guy was a bartender. But by December 21st, 2012, Desmond wasn't a victim anymore. The assassins had located the Grand Temple, an ancient ICU installation, hiding a device capable of stopping a catastrophic coronal mass ejection from wiping out human civilization. One problem: activating the device would also release Juno, a vengeful ECU entity imprisoned inside for millennia. So here's the trolley problem from hell. Option 1, don't touch the device, humanity gets nearly wiped out, and Desmond's legacy gets twisted into a tool for genocide. Option 2, flip the switch, save everyone, but unleash an ancient god with a grudge. Desmond chose option 2. He activated the device, the shield deployed, and Desmond died. Just like that, 25 years old, saving 8 billion people, and nobody outside the Brotherhood even knew his name. Fans are still divided on whether this was a bold narrative choice or a fumbled ending to the series' most important character. But love it or hate it, no other death in this franchise carries that kind of weight. And yet, compared to what happened to the next protagonist on our list, at least Desmond got a clear ending. Aveline de Grandpré. Aveline de Grandpré spent most of her story hunting a shadowy figure known only as the Company Man. This mysterious Templar had been pulling strings across Louisiana while Aveline tore through every lead she could find. After all that work, she finally uncovers the truth. The Company Man was her own stepmother, Madeleine, which is, not ideal, but it gets worse. When Aveline brought this intel to her mentor Agate, the one person who should have had her back, he completely lost it. Convinced she had betrayed the Brotherhood, he tried to kill her. She defeated him, and rather than face the consequences, Agate threw himself off a cliff. So her stepmother is a Templar mastermind, and her mentor just committed suicide in front of her. Cool. Here's where Aveline goes. Full ice cold. Instead of spiraling, she used Agate's death as a cover story. She pretended to join the Templar Order, walked into her own induction ceremony like everything was fine, and then killed Madeline and every Templar in the room. No hesitation, no monologue, just execution. But here's the frustrating part. After all of that, we have zero idea how Aveline actually died. She's confirmed as an ancestor of Subject 1, so she survived long enough to have descendants. Beyond that, nothing. The first female protagonist in the series, and her fate is a complete blank. I don't know what to tell you. But if Aveline's ending is frustratingly vague, Connor's is frustratingly depressing. Connor Kenway. Connor is the one that hurts the most, and I don't mean in a dramatic, heroic, blaze of glory kind of way. I mean in the way that actually sticks with you at 2 a.m. when you're staring at the ceiling. Born Ratanhnake Tun, Connor was a master assassin of Kanyenkehaka descent who threw everything he had into the American Revolution. He genuinely believed that fighting for freedom would build a better world for his people, for his family, for everyone. The guy gave up his youth, his safety, and his identity for a cause bigger than himself, and the world repaid him with almost nothing. By the end of the game, Connor watches the very nation he helped build immediately begin selling his people out. His allies move on. George Washington, the man he bled for, signs orders that directly harm the Kanyenkehaka. Connor wins the war and loses everything the war was supposed to protect. Supplementary canon like the Reflections comics show Connor eventually married and had daughters, and he continued his assassin work. So it's not all darkness, but that almost makes it worse. He kept going, kept fighting, kept building a brotherhood in a country that already proved it would never return the favor. No heroic last stand, no peaceful bench in Florence, just a man still grinding away at a mission the world already forgot about. Connor didn't get a death scene. He got something worse. He got to watch his entire life's purpose get undermined in real time by the people he saved. But if Connor's ending is the cruelest in the franchise, his grandfather, Edward's, might be the most violent. Edward Kenway. Edward Kenway lived exactly 42 years. That's it. 42 years to go from a greedy Welsh privateer chasing gold across the Caribbean to a genuinely committed assassin who believed in something bigger than himself. And the universe rewarded that transformation by murdering him in his own living room. Here's the thing about Edward. After everything he survived, the pirates, the Templars, the entire Caribbean trying to kill him on a daily basis, he actually made it out. He retired. He moved his family to their estate in London, hung up the hidden blades, and chose peace. He chose his kids. He chose a normal life. On December 3rd, 1735, Templar Grand Master Reginald Birch sent mercenaries to the Kenway household with 3 objectives: kill Edward, steal his journal, and kidnap his daughter Jennifer. They accomplished all 3. Edward was murdered in the one place he thought was safe, the home he'd built specifically to escape the violence that defined his entire adult life. But the worst part isn't even his death. It's what happened after. The trauma of watching his father get killed and his sister get dragged away destroyed his son Hatham. That boy grew up and walked directly into the arms of the Templar Order. Birch didn't just kill an assassin, he created a Templar. One murder, and the Kenway bloodline flipped sides for an entire generation. Reginald Birch is one of the most despicable villains in the franchise specifically because of this. He didn't beat Edward in a fight. He waited until Edward was happy, then took everything from him. But if Edward's death created a Templar, wait until you meet the assassin who willingly became one. Shay Patrick Cormac. Shay is the franchise's moral wildcard, and honestly, he might be the most interesting protagonist Assassin's Creed has ever produced. Because depending on which game you're playing, he's either the hero or the villain. Sometimes both at the same time. Here's the setup. Shay started as a member of the Colonial Brotherhood, trained assassin, full commitment, the whole deal. Then he defected to the Templar Order and never looked back. Not once. He remained a Templar loyalist until the day he died, which is a sentence that should make every assassin fan deeply uncomfortable. Starting in 1752, Shay captained the Morrigan and spent the next 16 years hunting Isu artifacts across the globe for the Templars. 16 years of sailing, fighting, and tracking down precursor technology for the other team. His most significant act came in 1776 when he assassinated the assassin Charles Dorian in Versailles and reclaimed a precursor box. If that last name sounds familiar, it should. Charles Dorian was Arno's father. Shay literally created the next game's protagonist by killing his dad, which is, not ideal. After retrieving the box, Shay continued traveling the world searching for more Isu artifacts, and then the record just stops. His actual death is never documented anywhere in the franchise. No tomb, no final cutscene, no database entry explaining how he went out. The man who lived between two worlds simply vanished from history. And honestly, that feels right. A protagonist who is simultaneously an antagonist deserves an ending that nobody can pin down. But speaking of the kid he orphaned in Versailles, let's talk about what happened to Arno Dorian. Arno Dorian's story is one of the most tragic in the entire franchise, and he never even gets the dignity of a proper death scene. Let me explain. Arno was orphaned at 8 years old when his father, Charles Dorian, was assassinated in 1776. And here's where it gets really messed up. The person who killed his father, Shay Cormac, the protagonist of the previous game. You literally played as the guy who ruined this kid's life. That's one of the coldest cross-game connections Ubisoft has ever pulled off, and nobody talks about it enough. After losing his father, Arno was adopted by Francois de la Serre, who was secretly a Templar, so this kid went from an assassin household to a Templar household without even knowing it. And then, because the universe apparently wasn't done with him, Francois was murdered too, and Arno was framed for it, thrown into the Bastille. At this point, the guy's basically collecting parental deaths like they're achievements. He escaped during the storming of the Bastille after a fellow prisoner named Pierre Belec recruited him into the Brotherhood. And during his initiation, Mirabeau declared that Arno had died with his sins and failures and was reborn as a novice assassin. That's the only death Arno gets. A metaphorical one, a symbolic shedding of his old self, his actual physical death, never addressed. Not in the games, not in the novels, not in any canonical material. He just exists in this permanent state of narrative limbo, which is, not ideal. But if you think an unresolved fate is frustrating, wait until you meet the Fry twins. Fry Jacob. Fry co-assassinated Grandmaster Crawford Starrick alongside his twin sister Evie, effectively dismantling organized Templar power in Victorian London. That alone should have been enough for a comfortable retirement. Maybe a nice pub, a medal, a quiet life, but Jacob is not a quiet life kind of guy. After Evie left for India with her husband Henry Green, Jacob stayed behind to rebuild the British Brotherhood and lead the Rooks, the gang network the twins had built from nothing. For 20 years, he ran London's underground assassin operations. 20 years of keeping the peace, training new recruits, and maintaining order. And then one of those recruits decided to become Jack the Ripper. Here's where it gets dark. In 1888, one of Jacob's own apprentices went completely rogue, seized control of the Rooks, and adopted the identity of history's most infamous serial killer. The student literally overthrew the master. Jacob's entire network, the thing he'd spent 2 decades building after his sister left, was ripped away from him by someone he personally trained. Which is, not ideal. It gets worse. Jacob was captured by the Ripper. The man who helped liberate all of London needed his sister to come back from India and save him. Evie returned, killed the rogue apprentice, and ended the Ripper's reign of terror. Jacob survived, but his pride probably didn't. As for how Jacob actually died, nobody knows. His death is never documented. What we do know is his legacy continued through his granddaughter Lydia Fry, who served the Brotherhood during World War I, so at least the family business stayed open. But if Jacob's story has a few gaps, his sister Evie's ending is even harder to pin down, Evie Fry. After everything we just covered with Jacob, you'd think the Fry family was destined for disaster. But Evie looked at her brother's catastrophic leadership, looked at the long history of assassins dying alone or getting stabbed in their own homes, and said no thank you. After she and Jacob took down Starrick and secured the Shroud of Eden, Evie married fellow assassin Henry Green and relocated to India, not as a retreat, not as exile, as a deliberate expansion of the Brotherhood's influence into new territory while also building the personal life she wanted, which is, not something assassins are historically great at. Here's the thing, almost every protagonist we've covered so far had to choose, duty or love, the Brotherhood or family. Ezio came closest to having both, but even he spent decades in violence before he got there. Evie just decided she was going to have the whole package from the start. Love, purpose, legacy, zero documented tragedy. She continued mentoring new assassins in India, training the next generation while building a life with Henry that actually lasted. Her specific death is never recorded. No ambush, no betrayal, no rogue apprentice burning everything down, just descendants who carried on the Brotherhood's work, proving she built something that outlived her. She might be the only protagonist on this list who genuinely won. But if Evie represents the best possible ending for an assassin, the next entry represents someone who started the entire thing from scratch and paid dearly for it. Bayek. Bayek of Siwa is the man who started everything. Not a chapter of the Brotherhood, not a regional branch, the entire thing. Born around 85 BCE, he was the last Medjay of Egypt, a title that carried centuries of warrior tradition behind it. And when the Order of the Ancients murdered his son Khemu during a failed attempt to crack open an Isu vault, Bayek didn't just seek revenge, he built an institution. In 47 BCE, alongside his wife Aya, Bayek co-founded the Hidden Ones. That organization would eventually evolve into the Assassin Brotherhood, meaning every single protagonist we've talked about in this video owes their creed, their philosophy, and their entire operational structure to this one grieving father from Siwa. That's a legacy that outlasted empires. But here's where it gets quietly devastating. We don't actually know how Bayek died. The details are sparse. What we do know is where he chose to be buried. Players can discover Bayek's final resting place in the Hotep Cavern in the Katara Depression, a location he personally selected, not because it was strategically important, not because it held some Isu artifact. He chose it because that's where he and Aya fell in love. The man who founded an organization dedicated to fighting tyranny across millennia made his final decision not about war, but about love. And when Layla Hassan discovers his tomb over 2,000 years later, his remains are still there, exactly where he wanted to be. I don't know what to tell you. Sometimes the quietest endings hit the hardest, but if Bayek's death was defined by choosing where to rest, the next protagonist's death was defined by finally being allowed to. Cassandra. Every other protagonist on this list had death come for them. Cassandra had to go find it herself. After wiping out both the Cult of Cosmos and the Order of the Ancients from Greece, Cassandra met her father Pythagoras, who handed her the staff of Hermes Trismegistus, one piece of Eden, one gift, biological immortality, which sounds incredible until you realize what it actually meant. 2,000 years. Alone. The Isu consciousness. Alethea, stored inside the staff, gave Cassandra a single directive: wander the globe, find dangerous pieces of Eden, and destroy them. So that's what she did, for 20 centuries. She watched the Roman Empire rise and fall. She watched plagues sweep continents. She watched every single person she ever loved grow old and die, while she just kept walking, and walking, and walking. Then in 2018, she met Layla Hassan, an assassin who had relived Cassandra's genetic memories to locate the gateway to the lost city. Cassandra looked at this woman, handed her the staff, and immediately died. No fight, no illness, no dramatic last stand. She simply let go of the thing keeping her alive and stopped existing. Her final act was extracting a promise from Layla to destroy every remaining piece of Eden and restore the balance between order and chaos. 2 millennia of solitary guardianship, condensed into one request and one handoff. She's the only protagonist who had to actively choose to become mortal again. Everyone else had death forced on them. Cassandra had to walk up to it and say yes. That's either the most tragic ending in the entire franchise, or the most merciful one. Probably both. But if you think choosing your own death is heavy, wait until you see where Eivor ended up spending hers. Eivor Varinsdottir, a Viking who conquered England, chose to die on the other side of the world in total obscurity. Let that sink in for a second. After eradicating the Order of the Ancients from England and ensuring the Hidden Ones had a permanent foothold on the island, Eivor did something nobody expected. She left. After 889, she turned her back on everything she'd built, everyone she'd fought beside, and sailed for Vinland to chase Isu knowledge buried in Odin's memories. And here's where it gets quietly beautiful. Eivor spent her final years not raiding, not conquering, not building alliances. She lived among the indigenous Kanyenkahaka people, which, if you're paying attention, directly connects her story to Connor's ancestry centuries later. She spent her days conversing with Odin's consciousness, finding a kind of peace that England never could have offered her. A warrior who shook an entire country chose stillness. She died there, in Vinland, and her grave sat undisturbed for over 1,000 years. No monument, no saga, no Viking funeral. Just bones in the earth on a continent most of Europe didn't even know existed yet. But here's the kicker. In 2020, the assassins discovered Eivor's remains and used her genetic memories to locate the Yggdrasil chamber, which allowed them to prevent a global catastrophe. Her death literally saved the world, not when it happened, but a millennium later. Most protagonists in this franchise are lucky if their sacrifice matters in the same century. Eivor's mattered across 10 of them. It echoes Altair's peaceful withdrawal, sure, but but Altair locked himself in a library. Eivor's grave became the key to humanity's survival, which is, slightly more impressive. But if you think dying peacefully means your story is over, wait until you hear about the protagonist who technically never died at all. Basim Ibn Ishaq. Basim is the protagonist that breaks the entire format of this video, because I genuinely cannot tell you how he died. I'm not even sure he can die. Let me explain. Born around 844 CE, Basim ibn Ishaq served as a master hidden one during the 9th century, operating out of Baghdad and assassinating high-ranking members of the Order of the Ancients. On paper, he's a standard Assassin's Creed protagonist, skilled, dedicated, effective. But here's the thing, Basim isn't just Basim. He's a human vessel for the Isu entity Loki, the actual Norse trickster god, walking around in a 9th century Iraqi man's body like it's a rental car, which means every question about his death gets filtered through this bizarre philosophical lens. Did the man die? Did the god die? Can the god die? I don't know what to tell you. What I can tell you is the human side of Basim's story, and it's not flattering. Before any of the cosmic Isu nonsense, Basim was orphaned as a child after his father died and left him with nothing. A kid alone on the streets of Baghdad. Whatever divine consciousness was already stirring inside him, none of it mattered to a child surviving alone in the caliphal capital. That's the tragedy of Basim. You can debate whether an Isu reincarnation is truly mortal, but the boy who grew up parentless on those streets was very much human, and very much shaped by that suffering. His ultimate fate remains completely undocumented. No tomb, no death scene, no quiet bench in Florence. For all we know, Loki's still out there somewhere, wearing a different face, which is, not ideal. But speaking of protagonists whose stories are still being written, let's talk about one of the franchise's newest additions, Fujibayashi Naoi. Naoi is the newest protagonist in the entire franchise, and her story isn't about some grand philosophical revelation or ancient conspiracy. It's about losing everything and deciding to build it back anyway. She's the fictional daughter of Fujibayashi Nagato, a real historical figure from Japan's Iga province. In 1581, Oda Nobunaga launched the Tensho Iga War, sending his forces to systematically wipe out the shinobi clans. Naoi's home, her people, her entire way of life was annihilated in a single campaign. She survived. Most didn't. After the invasion, she partnered with Yasuke to hunt down members of the Shinbakufu, a secretive organization founded by the ousted shogun Ashikaga Yoshiaki, who was basically using every tool at his disposal to claw back power. Together, they dismantled the group piece by piece. And once that was done, Naoi turned her attention to something arguably harder than killing: rebuilding. By 1582, she had reconstructed the Brotherhood from the ashes of Iga's destruction. There's also a personal thread running through all of this. Evidence surfaced suggesting her mother, Tsuyu, might still be alive, which is, a pretty significant emotional complication when you're trying to rebuild an entire organization from scratch. As for how she dies, she doesn't. Not yet. Naoi is the most recently introduced protagonist in the franchise, and her story is still actively ongoing. No documented death, no gravestone, no final cutscene. She represents the future of Assassin's Creed, and whatever fate awaits her hasn't been written yet. But her partner? His story has a very different kind of mystery surrounding it. Yasuke. Yasuke is the only protagonist on this list who is a real person, not inspired by a real person, not loosely based on historical events. An actual human being who lived, breathed, and then vanished from recorded history entirely. Born around 1555 in Eastern Africa, Yasuke arrived in Japan in 1579 alongside the Jesuit missionary Alessandro Valignano. When Oda Nobunaga met him, the most powerful warlord in Japan was so fascinated that he granted Yasuke a sword, a house, a stipend, and the rank of samurai, not as a novelty, as a genuine member of samurai society, the first recorded foreigner to ever receive that honor. Yasuke served Nobunaga loyally until June 21st, 1582, when everything fell apart. Nobunaga's own vassal, Akechi Mitsuhide, launched a surprise attack at Honnoji. Yasuke fought until Nobunaga was dead, then joined his son Nobutada at Nijo Castle, fighting again until they were overwhelmed. He was captured. And then Mitsuhide made a strange decision. He spared Yasuke's life, declaring that because he was not Japanese, he should be sent to the Jesuits instead. 5 months later, a Jesuit missionary named Louis Frois wrote a letter thanking God that Yasuke had survived. That letter is the last confirmed record of Yasuke's existence, No death record, no grave, no further mention in any document, anywhere, ever. A man who became the first foreign samurai in Japanese history simply disappeared. Nobody knows if he stayed in Japan, returned to Africa, or lived to old age. The answer is literally lost to time. Every other protagonist on this list has a story, a theory, or a final cutscene. Yasuke has a 500-year-old letter in silence. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, click the video on the screen now.